How, Cordelia, mend your speech a little, lest it may mar your fortunes. King Lear was scolding a thankless daughter when he spoke those words in Shakespeare's grand tragedy. But lawyers too often utter speech, both verbal and nonverbal, which they later find to their regret to be in need of mending. Hello, I'm Jeff M. Brown, legal writer with the State Bar of Wisconsin. I'm here today with Meg Bucaro, who's scheduled to give the closing plenary at the State Bar's annual meeting and conference on June 21 in Green Bay. Meg Bucaro is a communications coach, professional speaker, and an instructor. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Great, we're happy to have you. Your plenary is titled Communicate More Effectively, Power Moves to Increase Confidence and Influence. Would you give us a preview of your plenary, please?
Sure, absolutely. Generally speaking, our presence can have a lot of power and can have a lot of influence. But if it's not intentional, sometimes it might have some consequences that we may regret or look back and think, I could have done that better. And so what we're going to be covering is what are those items, what are those key points, and what we can control, what we should be looking at intentionally as far as our presence of how we show up. Part of that is what we say. A lot of it is how we say it. And so we're going to talk about some of the key points and ingredients in what it takes to not just present ourselves, but do it intentionally where we can have control over the influence that we would like to have over others.
What's one of the biggest blind spots lawyers have when it comes to communication?
In my experience in working with attorneys, but really in general, in very different professions, I think part of it is, especially with attorneys, generally speaking know how to communicate. They have a foundational knowledge and experience. However, what happens is when we do something so often, it can come to us kind of like on autopilot. Well, this is what I always do. This is my comfort zone. This is how I do this. But do we know that that is as effective as it can possibly be for each individual? We all have different styles. We have different knowledge, different experience, different communication skills that we might be very strong at, but also have some opportunity for improvement. So really going high level to say, okay, we're already here, whereas maybe the general population might be here when it comes to attorneys in your daily activities for your professional work. But there's still so much to do high level as far as communication skills. And so I think any blind spot might be, well, I'm doing okay, and I can do this fairly well. And then not necessarily thinking, relying on that and not necessarily understanding or thinking about intentionally how we show up and what we might be able to even improve on, no matter kind of where we're at as far as our experience and comfort zones.
You've also worked with a lot of police agencies consulting on communication issues. What are some of the similarities and differences between police agencies and lawyers when it comes to these sort of communication topics?
So I think this is best answered by a quick example. And that was, I'll never forget, sitting in a state's attorney's office, and he was considering using my training programs to train some ASAs. And long story short, I was sitting there and they were kind of vetting my experience and we were having a conversation. And they basically sat me down and said, listen, they're going to look at you and think you're not an attorney. And I said, I understand that. I've also worked with law enforcement. And then I was told, oh, we're not as bad as law enforcement. My work is based in evidence-based research. And so that works obviously with law enforcement as well as attorneys, anybody who communicates. And so I think that is really important to have a foundational knowledge of. I think some differences, there's obviously just their day-to-day interactions. Yes, they might both, law enforcement and attorneys might meet up in whether it's meetings or courtrooms, but the function is different. Even though the communication foundationally has some similarities, but influence, both professions are trying to influence how they do it, the situations they're in, the level of maybe whether it's experiences or education of the people that they're dealing with, obviously will vary.
So, Meg, how did you get into working on these communications issues with clients?
So, a number of years ago, I had a classmate who was at the time deputy chief of a local police department. And he had a detective who had a big trial coming up. And she confided in him that she was very nervous to be on the stand. Even though she had experience, this was something where she thought the news media might be there and she wanted to make sure she was fully prepared. So he contacted me knowing that I was teaching locally in higher ed. And he said, should she take her class or what can we do? And I said, let me meet her and see if we might be able to work together. I'd be happy to talk to her. And we hit it off immediately. I knew through a few different meetings with her and discussions where the nerves came from and how to help her through it. And that's what started coaching and speaking and training on how we show up intentionally, how we show up with influence and confidence. And I'm happy to say she had a fabulous trial and then referred me to the state's attorney's office to help with their training. So that is how I got into this.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Meg. I look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting and conference in Green Bay. I have to point out, however, two things. One, if you want to register for the conference, there's a link in the video summary below. Excuse me. But also, you on your website say a couple times that you are a rabid Chicago Bears fan, and this conference is in Green Bay, so I hope there's not any tension there.
I am also a realistic Chicago Bears fan, and our record states that Green Bay has beat us many, many, many times. So there's no happy to be in Green Bay. I respect Lambeau Field, just like Chicago Bears fans respect Soldier Field. So even though it's opposing teams, I'm with you. And I understand the legacy. And I'm a little jealous of all the quarterback history you have.
Sure. Well, we look forward to seeing you and talking about that in communications issues in June. Thanks again, Meg Bucaro.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to June.
Okay. Bye-bye.